Matthew chapter 22 verses 1 to 14. Jesus' parable of the marriage feast. It's Tuesday of the week of the crucifixion, and Jesus is debating with the chief priests and elders in the court of the temple. Jesus tells them a series of parables, and the one I'm looking at here is of the king, who is God, who invites his guests into his son's marriage feast, but they refuse to come, even killing the servants, and so he invites all and sundry into the feast. Verses 9 to 11 says this: Go therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage. So those servants went out into the highways, and gathered together all, as many as they found, both bad and good. And the wedding was furnished with guests. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man who had not on a wedding garment, and so on. Now in these verses, God looks with dismay at the banqueting hall festooned with flowers and draperies, and the tables glittering with glass and silver. But it's empty, just the angels standing, prepared to serve the guests who haven't come. God's answer is immediate. He sends out his servants into the wide world with the generous message that, regardless of their past, whether they are good or bad people, they are invited to the King's Son's marriage. Unbelievable. Grace, grace, grace. And typical of the God who, when he came to create the heavens, he lavished a million galaxies throughout the sky. Now the servants worked until the wedding was filled with guests. Knowing the big heart of their King and Lord, they worked until his hall was filled. Every place taken. You couldn't get another person in. There was standing room only, exactly as God wanted. When the hubbub of the assembly was heard throughout the king's palace of light, he entered the room, it says, to see the guests. Yes, to feast his eyes on the beauty of a room filled with all the sounds of delightful fellowship, the emphasis being on the word filled. His own son, Jesus Christ, warned us, about his Father's enormous generosity when he said these words, that God would pour into our laps a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That's Luke chapter 6, verse 38. He could have said, warning, blessings ahead. Now finally, in my imagination, I see that some will have noticed the king's modest entrance. Some of those guests in that hall would have noticed the king's modest entrance, and a murmur would run through the assembly, and the sound of the voices would subside as all eyes were turned in wonder at the kindly majesty of Almighty God, the Father.